Hey, Connexus Church, I'm so glad to be with all of you again. When I'm here, I always feel like such a connection with you and your community. Obviously, my friendship with Jeff over many years. But our churches are very similar. One of the things we love to do in our church is talk in church. Some of you grew up in places where like, hey, you're not allowed to talk in church. That is not true. So here's what I want you to do with somebody who is near you. And if you're sitting on your own, just go find somebody that you can sit next to and come up with, you're going to have 2 minutes, okay? It's like a little bit of a game, but there's no prizes and nobody wins, okay? It's 2024, people. Nobody wins. Everyone gets a trophy. The question is, what are all the possible scenarios where you would say these words, I am declining this date. I am declining this date. Okay, take 2 minutes and talk with the people around you. When would you use these words? In what situation? Go ahead. Well, what did you come up with? I mean, maybe for some of you, look, today was very practical. I literally just gave you words that you can text that guy who's really nice, but you don't actually want to date him. And you've been sending cryptic emojis, and now you could just say, I am declining this date, right? You would use it if you didn't want to go out with somebody. Or maybe, a lawyer says to their client, hey, the judge gave us this date for a court appearance, but I'm declining this date. I'm going to ask for another one. Maybe you might say, if you're very creative, hey, on such and such a date, I plan to decline, whatever that means. Or perhaps, hey, I know this was a superfood for the Bedouins in the desert, but I don't like dates, so I am declining to eat this date. Look, what's obvious in this exercise is something you already know. Context matters, right? Depending on the context, the meaning of those words change very much. And that's true about this statement as well. Who am I? Who am I? Depending on the context, we might be asking that question for very different reasons. I know that's a question I asked when I moved away from home at the age of 18 to go to a university a few hours away from where I grew up to a school of 15,000 people, and I knew no one and no one knew me. Total strangers. And what I realized within a week of getting there was I can be or do anything I want to be. Anything I want to do. No one is from my past is here, from my family, from my friend group. No one's looking over my shoulder. No one's policing my behavior. I can do anything I want. And I actually found myself asking that question, well, who am I really like on the inside without any of the externals to shape my behavior or the direction of my life? Who am I really? I remember asking it when I became a pastor. I had no plans to be a pastor in life. I was studying business and that's what I was going to do. And suddenly God called me to change my career and I ended up becoming a pastor. And I would go to these conferences with other pastors and very capable leaders and people that, at least what it seemed like to me, knew way more about the scriptures than I did, knew way more about God than I did, knew way more about church leadership than I did. And as I felt the insecurity coming up in me as I was in these circles, I would ask myself, like, who am I? Like, who do I think I am? What am I doing here? I don't belong here. I'm way behind, or I don't fit. Like, who am I? Yeah, I asked that out of a sense of insecurity. And then kind of more recently, closer to the bone, I injured my wrist in a freak kind of ATV accident 20-something years ago. And at the time, it was just sort of an annoying injury and didn't mean much to me. And then over the years, it started to nag me more and more. And now it's actually become debilitating. And for someone who's played sports my whole life and worked out for 35 years, I'm asking myself, if I'm not an athlete and I can't be a fit 40-something anymore, who am I really? I don't think I'm the only person that asks this question. I mean, you may be asking it if you're a young person coming to the end of your sort of high school years, grade 11, grade 12, or young adult, or like graduating, and people are asking you that really annoying question like, oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to study? Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to school? Are you going to go into the trades? Are you going to go to college? Are you going to go to university? Or what are you going to do next? And it's driving you crazy because you're asking yourself, yeah, who am I going to be? Who am I going to be in life? Like what? And you feel the pressure to answer that. It feels like a capital I identity crisis, you know? Or perhaps you're in a new place, in a new job, in a new school, in a new church, and you feel kind of just the pressure from the people around you or from yourself just to fit in. And you're kind of thinking, well, who am I going to be to them? Like, who am I to them? Who do they want me to be? Or maybe if you've recently retired or perhaps fired from a job or a profession of something that you have done for so many hours, for so many weeks, for so many years, and you're suddenly not doing it anymore, either because of somebody's choice or your own choice or an injury or something that happened in the marketplace beyond your control, and you're suddenly asking yourself, who am I now? Because I'm not this anymore. I'm not this title. Who am I now? Maybe you might just be asking out of, like I said, when you happen to be in certain environments and you feel insecurity coming up in you and you're asking yourself, like, who am I? I don't really fit. Or maybe some of us at times in our lives, or maybe even today, right, where we've done something really stupid or foolish or wrong or maybe illegal or immoral or unethical, something we never thought we would do. And we're asking ourselves, like, who am I? I didn't think I was capable of this. I didn't think I was that kind of person. Who am I really on the inside? I don't know if this is comforting for you at all or terrifying, but I think that life is a series of identity crises. That we're asking this question, who am I, all the way through life several times, and it means different things at different times, whether it's like, we would say like a capital I, identity crisis, or a lowercase one. I think this is something we all go through. And even though like identity is a hot topic, it's not a new topic. I don't actually think the question is new. I think it's as old as the earth. But here's what's unique about the time and this place that you and I are living in right now, and even as you may find yourself even asking that question today. We used to answer that question by looking around us. In ancient cultures and in different cultures, certainly non-North American cultures, possibly even today outside North America in certain places, people looked around them to answer that question. Like, who does my family say I am? Who does my tribe and my culture and my skin color say I am? Who does the country or the place or the village that I live? We looked externally. Other people told us who we are. It was our family or our place in life or the place we were born or the tribe we were a part of that told us, what we were going to do for a living, who we were going to marry, who we were not going to marry, what kind of life we were going to have economically, vocationally, socially, whatever. Those things were externally determined. But two major things have happened in the last couple of hundred years that have shifted where we look to answer that question. One of them is the Enlightenment movement. The Enlightenment movement of the 16th and 17th centuries, this is a gross oversimplification, so for any of you historians or philosophy buffs, please don't at me after this. I'm trying to simplify a couple hundred years in a couple minutes, but the idea of the Enlightenment was that reason is king. Reason is how you understand reality, how you can reason that, like rational thinking is the way we're going to get to where we need to go. And along with that, human progress and scientific revolution. And along with that, that was actually the season, or the Enlightenment movement planted the seeds of political and religious and social revolutions, where the separation of church and state happened, where people began to, generally speaking, distrust the systems of authority around them, whether that was king or God or country, government, whatever it was. People saw those places and those authority structures as manipulative and controlling, or just unstable and untrustworthy. And that's where you had political revolutions or religious revolutions. And so the focus again began to shift away from looking at the people around, even well into now the 21st century, where you distrust family or the breakdown of the family system itself. And along with that, some of the key Enlightenment thinkers, some of the philosophers, one of whom you may know heard of as René Descartes. And even if you've never heard of Descartes, you may have heard this, that as he was trying to answer the question, well, how do you know what's real in anything in life? His solution was, I think, therefore I am. In other words, if I can say it this way, Descartes and the philosophers around him at that time, along with the Enlightenment movement, psychologized reality. In other words, what I think I am, I am. Who I think I am, I am. And so he and many of the people around him in that shift that happened over the last few hundred years have landed us here in a place in the 21st century where when we're trying to answer the question, who am I? We no longer look to the systems and people and structures and communities around us. We look inside of us, and in particular to our mind. What I think I am, I am. And here's the problem with this. Look while I myself, and I know this church here at Connexus, and in fact, Christian spirituality deeply affirms the value of the individual and the capability that we have in our minds to reason, in our hearts to feel. Can I just submit to you that I do not think that we ourselves were built to handle the crushing weight of having to answer the question, who am I, all by ourselves, for ourselves. We are being told it's up to you. You can define and decide who you are. You can determine ultimate reality, not just internally, but exactly what you think you are, you are. And yet our minds and our bodies were not able to actually bear the weight of having to answer these deep questions or answer them over and over and over again. And so I don't think it's any coincidence that we now have also, along with this deep internalizing and psychologizing of reality, that we have many mental illnesses as well that goes with it, that we have epidemic levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and even suicide. That we were not made to handle and try to answer the question that comes up over and over and over again by ourselves and for ourselves. The good news is that even if and even when and as life is a series of identity crises, even if you're here today and you're like, this is a capital I question for me, or this is a lowercase I question for me, that in this place we are not alone. We are not left alone to figure it out, that God is actually with us. And I wanted to walk through a piece of scripture that actually helps us as we are, and as we will continue to wrestle with the question of who I am. As I said, I think life is a series of identity crises. And you and I, no matter where you are, you're either young or old, or you happen to be even a person of faith or not, or you're just exploring, wherever you happen to be in this journey, this is going to be a super helpful passage of scripture for you and a conversation hopefully to help you wrestle with that. I'm actually going to read from one of the Psalms, which is in the middle of the library of Scripture. It's actually, the book of Psalms was sort of the song and prayer book of the people of God, given to them, given words to sing and pray and listen. And it's written, this particular psalm, by David. And I want to give you a little bit of context of his life because it will help you make sense of what he wrote and actually will help us relate to this guy from 3,000 years ago. And we go, oh, a lot of distance removed us in terms of time and social setting and everything, but actually we can relate to him in a lot of ways. They don't actually know when he wrote this, which is really fascinating because we know a lot about his life. And what we know as we think about his life, there were many times where David possibly was wrestling with his identity and asking these questions. In fact, early on in his life, he was actually one of 8 sons born to a man in a household, a guy named Jesse. And there's this one point in time where God says to the prophet Samuel, hey, I want to anoint or establish a new king in Israel because I don't like the king who's there now. He's selfish. He's self-serving. He's going to destroy the nation. So I'm going to choose a new king. Go to this man's house, this guy Jesse. One of his sons is going to be king. Well, he goes to Jesse's house and he says, yeah, do you have sons? Yep, I have 7, even though he had 8. His 8th son, David, was out in the field as a shepherd. Now, I don't know if Jesse just forgot he had 8 sons. I mean, maybe after, I have 3, maybe after that you lose count. I don't know. Sometimes I do that as well. Or he just was like, oh, he's coming here to anoint someone a king, or this is an important visit from a prophet. David's not that important. He's just a shepherd boy. He is the grunt work of the family. So either way, he's totally left out and maybe kind of thinking like, oh my gosh, like who am I? Like a kind of an identity crisis, right? At that moment. And then he actually does get anointed king. But before he becomes king, there's this battle going on with David and Goliath, and he goes to the battle and to help out, and his brothers are like, what are you doing? You're the mule. You just came to bring us lunch. You're not a warrior. Who are you like to be here? It's just an insecurity, right? And then possibly like as he's starting to become king and realize he has the weight of a nation and all kinds of decisions on him, he might be thinking like, in fact, we have one place where he's recording, he's like, who am I and who is my family that God would have chosen me for this? Or who am I to carry out such a big task? My own father didn't even believe in me. I'm a shepherd. I wasn't raised to be a king. How am I going to do this? And so this psalm is so beautiful and personal in the sense that David could have written it at any point in his life as he was, and as we do, wrestle with this question of who I am. And I want to read the psalm for you. It's a little bit long, but bear with me. It's really important. And we're going to walk through is like, practically speaking, what does this do for us as we, and again, I don't know you. I don't know where your situation is, but I know if my life is any indication, some of the people I know, this is a question we will ask a lot. And so let's listen together. This is in Psalm 139. O Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to the heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness I cannot hide from you. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting. You know what struck me about this passage? I've read it many times, but as I read it in preparation to write this message, something leapt off the page to me as I was writing. David is wrestling with who he is. And even as we think about wrestling with this idea of like identity crises, and yet over and over and over, his statements begin not with I, but with you. He says, you know me, you searched me, you knit me together, you guide me, you bless me, you walk with me, you are there. He says, you know me, like 4 or 5 times. So many statements about you, about God. Why does he do this? Why in this quest to understand who he is over and over he's saying who God is. Saying you. I don't think it's some like kind of detached theological, philosophical musing about God is before he gets back to the main question. This isn't like a Bible trance he's gone into. Why does he say you over and over and over again? Can I suggest this? That in the quest to figure out who we are, when we are facing capital I or lowercase I identity crisis, the first answer to the question, who am I? Not the only question, but the first answer, the beginning point is this: I am someone in relationship with the living God. This is the basis of me understanding myself, not psychologizing my reality and who I think I am, but I begin with the answer to the question, who am I, begins with not me, but God. I am someone in relationship with God. And here's why this is important. This isn't just like, oh, it's you, it's not about me, I'm not worthy, that's not what this is. Listen to actually all of the ways that David, in his understanding of who God is, how much it means to him personally and what it means for himself. In verse 13 and 14, he says, you made me beautiful and complex and amazing. It says your workmanship, or that word can be translated masterpiece. It's so good. God, you made me so good. Someone once said, God don't make no junk, right? That's what he's saying as a modern day version. Verse 13 and 14, you made me beautiful, complex, and amazing. Verses 15 and 16 and even 1 and 2, God, you know me. You know my story. You don't just know things about me, like you could look at me and deduce some things, or you know I went here or went there. He's like, you know me. In verse 1 and 2, he says, you know all my thoughts. In verse 15 and 16, you saw me before I was born. You know all the days of my life. Verses 7 to 12, very poetic descriptions of the fact that you're always with me. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, or I'm in darkness, or I'm on the far side of the sea, you are always there. Verse 5, he says, your hand of blessing is on me. Like the hand of God. It's just like a good father who put in the ancient culture, in ancient Near East, and maybe some of your cultures even now, I know mine, when a father blesses the children, when a parent blesses a child, they put their hand on their head. It's like David saying, your hand isn't a hand of violence or heaviness on me. It's blessing. Verses 5 to 10, you support me and guide me. Even in hard and dark places, you are guiding me. And then he says in verse 23 and 24, you calm me and you comfort me. Like when I have anxious thoughts, you calm me. And when I have offensive ways in me, like you confront me. Like this is actually a good thing. You deal with the stuff in me that isn't good. You calm the anxiety in me that is bothering me, but you also deal with me. You confront me of the things that are not good. In verse 24, you lead me into everlasting life, which is not about heaven someday, one day. It just means life to the full. God, you lead me there. See, friends, the problem with any other answer to that question, who am I? If we don't begin with who God is, that I am someone in relationship to the living God, it's not that your gender is unimportant to who you are. It's not that your skin color is an unimportant part of who you are. It's not that you're the family you're born into, or the job you're going to do, or your skills and talents and your abilities. It's not that those things aren't important. They're just not enough to hold the weight of the question, who am I? See, this is not like David saying, oh, who is God? Isn't some compartmentalized conversation of like, oh, I have God faith bucket over here, and then I have my work bucket over here, and then I have my relationship bucket over here, and then I have my mental health bucket over here. It's like, no, this is the foundation for any other way I understand who I am. David's saying, who are you? You touch every part of my life. Knowing who you are and that I'm in relationship with you changes my identity on every level. And maybe just think about what this would have done for David, practically speaking, in his life. In that moment when he realizes that his own father just forgot to count him as one of the sons, or maybe even worse, didn't think that he would ever be king, like was not even important enough to be in the room. How important was it for David to know, God, you made me, and you made me beautiful, and you made me a masterpiece, even if my own father doesn't think so, even if my own brother's like, who are you? You're not a warrior, you're not a king. And then when he was actually becoming king or going to become a king, the current king finds out and is not happy about it and accuses him of wrongdoing. And David's like, hey, I'm not going to come kill you. I mean, that's what happened in the ancient days. You just kill the king so you can become king. And David kept hiding from saying, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to raise my hand against someone who God put in place. And so this current king is accusing him of things he has not done. How important was it for him to know, God, you know my thoughts, right? Like you see the innocence of my heart. Like you know who I am deep down. I wouldn't do this, or I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't think that. Like when he's being accused of wrongdoing. How important would it have been for him to know when he actually becomes king and that he has the weight of a nation on him, that he's got to make big decisions, that he knows that God, like it says in verse 5, God, you guide me. You understand my thoughts. Your ways and thoughts are so good. You can help me, right? You bless me. You protect me. And then when he actually did something he never thought he would do, when he murdered another man to take that man's wife, when he was exposed and caught as an adulterer and a murderer, he says, God, like, see the offensive ways in me and lead me in a better way. That's what he says, lead me in life everlasting. Who am I? I didn't think I was capable of such evil. God, change me, transform me, lead me in a better way. And then even when later on in life, when half the nation rejected him and his own son tried to kill him to take the throne, and he was literally hiding in caves when he's saying, God, even in the darkness, even when I'm hiding, you are with me. It's not just some poetic musing. It's like very real for him as he is in a place of loneliness and hiding and desperation and isolation to know, God, even there, no matter where I go, you are there. This was so real for him. I think what this does for us, friends, when we are able to internalize and start with the understanding of who God is and realize that the way he's made us and the way he forms us, the way he guides us, the way he blesses us, the way he protects us, the way he leads us, the way he is always with us, the way he calms us and confronts us. This frees us from either looking around us to decide who we are, what other people say we are, what our friend group says we should be, what the culture says we should be, what the latest fashion, the latest haircut, the latest shoes, companies say we should be, what sometimes even the weight of expectations maybe from our family or our church culture or whatever. Sometimes it frees us from the weight of having to be what other people think we are, but it also frees us from mentally having to determine and decide everything about who we're going to be. Our culture keeps saying, you can choose, you should choose, nobody else should tell you what to do. It's on you and it's all up to you. It frees us from being crushed by the weight of having to determine ourselves for ourselves and by ourselves, because we can get it wrong sometimes. I mean, just ask the people who thought they were Jesus or somebody else and led other people into a cult. Like, that's crazy, right? And we go, hey, probably you shouldn't be the one to say who you are. Most of us aren't going to do that, but we still have to wrestle with the anxiety and the frustration and the stress of feeling like we have to figure it out for ourselves. Knowing that we begin with God, who he is and how he sees us and his relationship to us is actually incredibly freeing. Before we talk about kind of the practical implications of what this means and how we would work this out in our lives, can I just say, I don't know where you're all at. Like I said, I'm not a regular part of this church, so I know even less of you than the people I know in my own church, but I certainly don't know each of your situations and what you're coming in here with today. Whether you're dealing with insecurity, being in a new place or a new job, or having lost a job or retired from one. I don't know if you're in a place of starting out in your career or deciding whether you're going to go to school or the trades or which school and what you're going to decide. You're going to change. You're already out of school. Now you don't know what to do next. Or maybe just you're facing kind of realities in your own life. You're like, who am I? I didn't think I was capable of this. I don't like who I am right now. I just want to read those statements again for you. These obviously meant something to David, but I want to read them again for you. as a little bit of the answer to the question, and maybe one of these in particular is going to land more than others of right where you're at. And my sense, even as I was writing this message, is this is for specific people today. I mean, I'll kind of always have a sense of like, okay, God, here's what you've given me to say. But I actually felt like with this one, like this is such an important thing for some of you in the room today. So I want you to kind of listen with your spiritual ears, you know what I mean, to hear the weight of this. Who am I? According to Psalm 139, I am in relationship with a God who made no mistake in making me. A God who made me as his masterpiece. A God who knows my whole story, all my thoughts, and what is going on in my life right now. A God who is always with me, no matter where I am or what I'm going through. A God who blesses and supports me. I'm in relationship with a God who guides me in the paths and decisions I need to make. A God who calms my anxiety. And a God who confronts me in order to help me grow. Can I just ask you to do something here for a moment? If any of those statements kind of really landed with you, if you're saying, hey, that needs to be an important part of the answer to the question, who am I? Would you just put your hand up? It's just, if nothing else, it tells the other people in the room, hey, you're not the only one, right? We're in this together. It's almost a way of even saying, God, I hear you. Right? Sometimes our bodies need to do something to make what our minds and hearts know is real, even more real. Just kind of put your hand up. That if one of those statements landed with you, you can put your hand down. Thank you for doing that. And if you put your hand up, and even if you didn't, I think what is happening here in this moment, in this psalm, and what we need to realize is this. In order to know who I am, I need to know whose I am. Knowing who I am starts with knowing whose I am, that I belong to a God like this. Now, here's what I know about that statement. That is very scary for 21st century Western people, right? That we would belong to someone else. Because what our culture tells us is, hey, you don't belong to anyone. And in fact, be wary of, be suspicious of anyone who claims to that ownership or authority or influence or say in your life. And you know what? We come by that suspicion honestly, right? Many of us have been failed by the people or systems or structures that have claimed to have ownership or authority or influence or say in our lives, whether those are parents or pastors or churches or government or institutions or teachers or whatever. I get it. We all have been, in a sense, betrayed and let down by people who claim to have our best interest in mind, who claim to want to have an influence or a say or a voice or ownership in our lives. And so we've been taught to say, hey, be suspicious of that. But here's why you can trust yourself to God. Here's why it would actually be good, and the beginning point of the answer to the question, who am I, to know whose you are, that you belong to God. You know why? Hear this. Because God needs nothing from you. Do you know that God does not need you to come to church? He does not need your money. He does not need your obedience. He does not need your prayers. He does not need your worship. He does not need your love. You know why? He was completely happy and fulfilled before any of us existed, before any of this earth came into being. God didn't create us because he needs us. He doesn't need fans and subscribers and likes and followers and your money or your attention. He does not need it. He doesn't need anything from us, but he wants things for us. He wants all of these things in Psalm 139 for us. He wants us to be grounded and stable in our identity. He wants us to know we are loved and valued and created as a masterpiece. He wants us to know that we are guided. He wants us to receive his blessing. He wants us to feel the comfort of his presence. He wants us to remember whose we are. He wants us to experience peace in our anxiety. He wants us to grow out of the immaturity and the brokenness in our lives so we can become more of who we are meant to be. These are all the things God wants for you. So we can trust when we say, oh, I belong to you, that's the starting point. Knowing who I am begins with knowing whose I am. And you might say, Vijay, well, how do you know this is who God is? It's a good question. In fact, David himself, how did he know that's who God was? He had a bit of a distant picture of who God is, but God did not leave it up to us to guess about who he is. One of the biographers of Jesus said this, that no one has ever seen God, but the Son, that is Jesus, who came from the very center of the Father God, has made God known to us. Jesus said it like this, if you've seen me, you've seen God. And Jesus came and offered these very things. Identity, love, security, grace, blessing, guidance, presence, peace, correction, forgiveness, change. And he said, I did not come to be served by you, but to serve you. Jesus demanded nothing from people. He wanted things for them. He didn't need anything from them. He actually refused to take money from them. He refused political power. He refused influence. He refused to use them to make a name for himself. He is the one authority, the one person on the planet we can trust ourselves to belong to because he needs nothing from us and he wants these things for us. And so here's what I would suggest practically for you and I, no matter where you are in the faith journey. If you're new to faith, you're just exploring faith, you're like, hey, this is my first time here. I'm so glad you're here. Connexus built this church for you. Or if you're well along in the journey of faith, over our time and over our whole lives, we will be having a series of identity crises, whether capital I or lowercase I. And as we do, right, if we are on if knowing who we are begins with knowing whose we are, then I would say this, just go on a quest to know Jesus more. Go on a quest to know him more. And practically, let me just give you 3 suggestions where I think you could begin. 1, if you're a reader, can I suggest a book by John Ortberg called Who is This Man? It is an incredible account of the impact of Jesus' life in our world. Things that you had no idea came from the Jesus movement. If you're a reader, maybe you can grab that on Audible. That would be such a good book for you to start. Or the quest to know Jesus more. Perhaps you may want to go back in the Connexus teaching series archives that you can find on the website to a series that Mark Clark did a little while ago called The Problem of Jesus, to get to know Jesus more. If you're not a reader, but you're more of a listener or a watcher, I would start there. Or perhaps if you're an explorer, I know Connexus regularly runs a course that we and many other churches around our country do called the Alpha Course, and that'll be happening later on this year. You can find out more about that on the Connexus website about the Alpha Course. It's really just helping you, especially if you're like, hey, I have lots of questions about Jesus. Great. That's what Alpha is for. I'd encourage you wherever you happen to be and to take a step to know Jesus more. If knowing who we are begins with knowing whose we are, we need to go on a lifelong quest to know Jesus more. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you that this is who you are. That you are the God who made us beautiful, complex, amazing. That you know our whole story, beginning to end. Everything we have done, everything we will do. You know our thoughts and our motives and our heart. You know everything that some of the things we've been too scared to tell other people, or we think that we would be rejected if we did. You know everything about us. Your hand on us is not heavy or violent, but it's a hand of love and blessing and grace. You are in front of us and behind us. You guide us. You are with us in dark and hard places. You bring your peace into our lives and your grace when we have fallen and failed. God, there is no one like you. Thank you that this is who you are. and help us, each person in this room, wherever we are in our journey, to know you more. That we can begin to know whose we are, and out of that, to put all of the rest of the pieces of our identity together, starting from knowing you. Help us to do this. In your name we pray. Amen.